Hello, and thank you all for joining us for this special virtual series where we're joined by Scott Ambler. And we've been living in a VUCA world, and this is especially true in the 21st century where most businesses have come to a standstill because of the pandemic. And to help us navigate through these uncertain, volatile times, we're joined by Scott Ambler, who's going to be presenting about how we can prepare for the next time using the disciplined agile strategy. Now, most of you might already be aware of what the discipline agile toolkit is about, where it helps you to navigate through your evolving way of working, not only at the team level, but also at an individual and at an organizational level. A little bit about Scott. Scott is serving as the vice president and the chief scientist of Disciplined Agile at Project Management Institute, and he also leads the evolution of the Disciplined Agile toolkit, and he is a very well-known international keynote speaker. He's also the co-creator of the Disciplined Agile toolkit, as well as the Agile modeling and the Agile data methodologies. He's also co-authored several books, and I would particularly recommend the book Choose Your Wow, an executive's guide to the Disciplined Agile framework. If you're not able to find it at a bookstore, it's also available on Amazon. And Scott regularly blogs at Disciplined Agile Delivery and ProjectManagement.com. Before we get started, just a few tips about this webinar. So this webinar will last for about 60 minutes, and we've reserved the last 15 minutes for Q&A. So you could see the left section would have a option for asking your questions, and we'll get Scott to answer some of those questions towards the end. And at any point, if you feel the video or the audio is not clear enough, please refresh the page. And for further updates and webinars, you can follow us at Zoho Sprints. And if you like any interesting slide by Scott, feel free to make use of the hashtag Discipline Agile, post it on Twitter or LinkedIn, and tag Zoho Sprints and PMI. You can also mention Scott Ambler. He's active both on LinkedIn as well as Twitter. Uh, Thank you, Scott, for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time to addressing our community virtually, especially in these VUCA times. I hand over the virtual stage to you. We're looking forward to your insights.
Fantastic. So what I'd like to talk about is how do we prepare for the next time? How do we as individuals, as teams, as organizations, be prepared for the next changes that we face? Now, there's several issues here that I want to go through. First of all, I'm going to talk about what does it actually mean? What does next time actually mean? Because I hope it won't be as bad as what we're experiencing right now with COVID, but you never know. So we'll walk through that. Then I'm going to walk through Disciplined Agile, and I'm going to walk through now this is a very deep topic, which I'm going to do a brief overview of. But what I want you to do is understand that you've got choices, that we can break out of method jail or framework prison. I'll talk about what that means later, but we need to look outside of the Agile box if we want to be successful. And we really need to go beyond some of this mainstream Agile stuff that we've been very familiar with for a long time now. But as COVID taught us, we really do need to start questioning some of the rhetoric that we've heard over the years and really be smarter about the way that we work. And then I'll actually walk you through how a team can choose their own way of working, how they can evolve. So as your environment changes, as it evolves, how can you learn? How can you evolve and improve the way that you work so that way you can be more competitive? Because one of the harsh realities that we all face right now in the current COVID environment, let alone whatever the new normal is for post-COVID, which might be many months away still. But regardless, it will be a significantly more competitive landscape than what we're used to now. And if your organization is going to survive and hopefully better yet thrive, then you need to become more competitive. You need to learn how to evolve your way of working to reflect, to respond to changes in the marketplace, because your competitors will be doing that too. and you need to be as good or better than them if you want to continue on. So anyway, so what does next time mean? So COVID-19 is what's called a black swan event. So swans are typically white, and but every so often this black swan appears. A black swan is born. It's a very unusual event. And COVID-19, I'm sure many of you have heard this called a black swan event by now. This is a black swan event. It's very, very rare, but pandemics do happen. We've probably been overwhelmed by now with discussions about the Spanish flu in the early 1900s, about the Ebola and many other pandemics that we've seen, and certainly SARS 15 years ago. But certainly COVID-19 is a black swan event, and unfortunately, it's hit us all at once and hit us fairly quickly. Many organizations were not prepared for this. They're not resilient enough to survive what's happening. I'm based in Canada, but all over the world we're seeing organizations go out of business now and to really struggle and have to ask for handouts and help because they're not resilient enough to respond quickly to the changing environment that they find themselves in. So other black swan events may occur in the future. So we can count on this. So there will be more pandemics in the future. Maybe we'll learn now how to respond better to them. But certainly climate change is coming our way. Certainly questionable economic times are coming our way. So we have very, very huge challenges. Many of us may suffer environmental challenges this year. In North America, we're looking at a nasty hurricane season. So there could be some more challenging events. Rising oceans and all those challenging things. But even if we get really lucky, and in our lifetime we don't see another black swan event, we will certainly see many other challenges that come our way. This is absolutely guaranteed to occur. I don't have to preach about how the only constant is change and how the rate of change is increasing. This is the norm. We are all unique people on unique teams in unique organizations facing unique circumstances. So we need to embrace this, and these circumstances are constantly evolving. So we need to embrace these ideas and act accordingly. So the question is how are we going to respond? And are you able to respond? Do you know how to respond? And we've learned the hard way in some cases. So our teams face many different situations. So for years in Disciplined Agile, we've talked about scaling. What types of scaling issues do teams potentially face? Now, it's interesting with COVID, many of us have learned how to work remotely in the last few months. This is not new. From a Disciplined Agile point of view, the business as usual. But for many people, I'm sure if you think back to the distant past of January, I'm sure many of you had Agile coaches, maybe even some of you on this call, you either had Agile coaches or were Agile coaches that were preaching how Agile had to be co-located, or you at least had to be in the same building, and if you weren't doing that, therefore you weren't Agile, and you're evil and not pure, and all of this stuff. Well, now suddenly all those coaches around the world are preaching about remote Agile and how it works, and it's wonderful, and you don't have to worry about it now. And I'm sure in a few months we're going to start seeing, we've already started seeing articles, but we'll certainly start seeing books about, the guide to remote Agile and all those good sorts of things. So we've learned the hard way that we can in fact work in a remote situation, often in multiple time zones and even globally. But that's just one scaling factor. Many people consider team size to be a scaling factor, and sure enough it is. But there's many others. Compliancy, and the point is, and complexity and domain complexity and technical complexity. And the point is that your team is a unique situation. Not only that, but your team will be somewhere. You can rate your team right now. I'm sure many of you are thinking this. Where does my team fit in all this? And everybody will give themselves whatever rating is applicable on these axes. But the point is that the team just down, the team that used to be just down the hall from you, but other teams in your organization, if they were to rate themselves on this chart, they would have different ratings because they're different teams and different situations. So within your organization, you could be all over the board. It's interesting when I give executive workshops and I show executives this, and I work through exercises where we use this chart, and we do it in several ways. But the only response I have ever gotten from executives is they look at this chart and they go, "Oh, we have all of this." Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And different teams will have different combinations of this. So the point is that your teams must be allowed to choose their own way of working. And the situation is constantly evolving, as I've said several times now. So not only do you need to initially choose your way of working, but you need to be prepared to evolve it as your situation changes. So different teams in different situations will work in different ways. Now that has a very interesting implication along the lines of the defined frameworks, even though they're wonderful, will not always apply to all of your teams. So different teams will need to work in different ways. So one size does not fit all. So one way of working, one process framework will not get the job done for you in any reasonably sized organization. You need to be able to choose your own way of working. And this is the way you prepare yourself for next time. Instead of saying, here's the official framework and this is the way everybody's going to work, and then everybody gets blindsided all at once, instead, I'll teach your teams how to choose their own way of working. And therefore, when things do change, they can respond to that change effectively. So what is Disciplined Agile? So Disciplined Agile is a toolkit. It's not a framework. We distinguish between that, and this confuses a few people. But basically, instead of telling you what to do, instead, what we do is we work through, here's what you need to think about, here are your options, and here's how to choose between the options. So we give you choices, and we teach you how to choose between those choices. So in many ways, where a framework gives you a fish for a day, in DA, which is great, it feeds you, and that's important. But in DA, what we do is we teach you how to fish. We teach you how to develop your own process, how to develop your own way of working, and to evolve it over time. So we're effectively teaching you how to fish. And yes, that's a little bit harder. It's very easy. You hand somebody a fish, there you go, eat. It takes a little more skill, a little more discipline in order to fish for your own food. But by teaching you how to fish, we'll actually feed you for life. And I think this is an absolutely critical skill. So where some of the frameworks will tell you, oh yes, it's the art of the possible, and you can evolve the framework on your own to meet your own needs, and that is absolutely true. I'm going to show you how to do that. They don't actually give you a lot of advice for how to do it. They just sort of wave their hand. It's like, oh, here's a fish. Oh, and by the way, you could probably learn how to fish too, and hire our expensive coaches to learn how to do that, because we're happy to make money off you like that. So this is what's going on in the industry. So we need to be, so it's possible to do better. So one of the challenges we face as an industry is Agile is effectively devolved into chaos. There's thousands of great practices and strategies out there now. This is just a small handful of them. So it's great. Like I'm a firm, like I love having choice. I think that's a great thing. But how do you choose? How do all these techniques fit together? When do you do each one? When don't you do each one? To what extent should you do them if it makes sense to do them? So these are important questions that we need to be able to answer. And that, and if you're a process expert, or if you've got decades of experience, then you've got a fairly good shot at answering these. But if you're not, and if you find yourself in a new situation where you don't really, that you've never dealt with before, and now you got to figure it out suddenly, you've got a problem. So maybe we can up our game a bit. So what we do in Disciplined Agile, Disciplined Agile is a toolkit. Myself and Mark Lyons are co-creators of this. Recently, we've merged the awesome work that Al Shalloway has done with Flex into the toolkit. And what we do in DA, we provide an umbrella over all these Agile and Lean techniques, and even some traditional techniques as well. And we show how they all fit together. We help you to choose, to pick the ingredients off the shelf in order to cook your dinner for tonight, in order to form a way of working that makes sense for your situation. And that in whatever you're doing today, we can show you how to improve upon that. So one of our philosophies, which I'll work through later, is you start where you are. So if you're doing Scrum, you're doing Safe, you're doing Less, you're doing traditional, whatever you're doing, that's great. So start where you are, do the best that you can in the situation that you face, and always try to get better. And it's that last part, that's the hard part, and that's where we help you in DA. So let's see how that works. So DA is organized into 4 views. We start with a mindset view. So, as all the coaches will tell you, it's important to be agile. But if you don't know how to do agile, you're not going to be able to get the job done. So yes, mindset's absolutely critical, but we also need to have skill set as well. So we cover the full gambit on that, or full gamut. So one of the other 4 views is flow. So we have a collection of life cycles and workflows. Different teams will work in different ways. So we have to support multiple life cycles to support that. There's roles and responsibilities, and there's a wide range of roles. It's not just about the 3 or 4 Scrum roles, but there's dozens of roles in your organization. You can choose to observe this if you want to. And there's different team structures. There's different ways we can organize our teams and our teams of teams. And then, of course, there's all these practices as well. And we have something we call goal diagrams that enable you to identify and traverse them. And I'll show you an example of this in a bit, because if there's hundreds of practices, how do you find them? And because if you don't even know what to look for, right, you don't even know what terminology to use in some cases, you'll never find them. I'm sure many of you are working in organizations where you're still struggling with basic questions like how does architecture fit in into Agile, or how does security fit in, and all these good sorts of things. And if you don't know the terminology to use to go looking for that information, or if you don't even know that it exists because, well, you didn't hear about it in your 2-day certification course where you mastered Agile, then how could you possibly find it if you don't even know to go look? How are you going to find this stuff? So, anyways, we teach you how to look. We teach you how to find the right techniques for the situation that you face. So the mindset. We used to describe the mindset as an extension to the Agile Manifesto from 2001. We recently moved away from that. We found it too constraining, and there's just too much baggage around that. And frankly, it's 20 years old, and we've learned a lot since then. So we've moved beyond it, is I guess the short story here. So we believe in a collection of principles in DA. So ideas like being pragmatic. So it's not just about being agile. It really isn't. It's about being as effective as you can be in the situation that you face. So sometimes the best that you can do is an old-fashioned traditional technique, and that's great. Let's do that. We don't have to be agile. We want to be effective. We want to have awesome people and awesome teams. Because context counts, because everybody's in a different situation, we need to have choices. We also want to work in an enterprise-aware situation. We need to move beyond the agile team. This is what business agility is all about. How do we become agile at the enterprise level, not just at the team level? And so I think this is one of the areas where agile coaches and many agile teams still struggle because of the team focus in agile, which is a great thing. Don't get me wrong, but it's not sufficient. And we really need to look beyond the team, and that requires a different mindset and a different set of behaviors than what we typically see coming out of mainstream agile teams like Scrum teams and good stuff like that. So all that's a good start, but we really do need to go beyond and services, be customer centric, because we want to delight our customers, not just satisfy them, but we want to delight them. And this is particularly true, when we're preparing for the next time, when we if we want to survive, we really need to focus on delighting our customers, on bringing value to them on a regular basis, because if we don't, other people will. So in order because we believe in these because we believe in these principles, we make promises to ourselves, to our colleagues, to the teams we're on, to our stakeholders. So we want to create psychological safety and embrace diversity. We want to be a good place to work. We want to accelerate value realization. We want to become more effective. We have to become more effective. We want to improve predictability and keep our workloads in capacity. And we want to improve continuously. We have to be constantly getting better. When I look at organizations such as Facebook and Google and eBay and others, like these really scary, hyper-competitive organizations, how did they become that way? It's not because they adopted frameworks. They would laugh at you if you even suggested that. Instead, what they do is they've chosen to improve continuously, and because they've been doing it for so long,
That's why they're so scary now. That's why they're so far ahead of the rest of us, is because they've been improving continuously, whereas you were trying to adopt frameworks. So huge difference in mindset. And we'll walk through some industry stats on that, by the way, in a few minutes. And because we make these promises, in order to fulfill them, we follow a collection of guidelines, and these guidelines will vary based on your organization, but because there's different ways that you can implement them, of course. But for example, we want to have semi-autonomous, self-organizing teams. It's not just about whole teams. The whole team mantra was a great idea, but it never really played out. Only 2 or 3% of Agile teams were ever whole. They're always semi-autonomous. So if you have to interact, if your team has to interact with another team to get the job done, for whatever reason. So for example, you've got to go to somebody to get money to fund your team. You're no longer whole. You're at best, you're semi-autonomous. And that's fine. That's the reality that you face. So let's be honest about that, and let's be as effective as possible at that. We want to leverage and enhance organizational assets. We want to reuse things as much as possible. We want to pay down technical debt. We want to create environments that foster joy. We change our culture by changing our behaviors, by improving the system, by improving our management structure. So many organizations are really struggling with culture change because their culture is misaligned with what the marketplace needs and what your organization needs to be effective. And the challenge is that it's very difficult to change culture, but what you can do is change the way that you're organized. You can change the way that you're working, and over time, culture will hopefully follow. So it takes a very long time to evolve an organization's culture, even just a team's culture, let alone an organization's culture. So there's no quick wins here if you're looking for one. So in DA, we're pragmatic. We deal with reality. We observe the situation that we're actually in, and we act accordingly, and we do the best that we can, and we always try to improve. So one of the things that's absolutely critical to observe is that your organization is what's called a complex adaptive system. It's a network of teams. This is something that Steve Denning likes to talk a lot about. So you've got this network of teams that are interacting. So my team has its own way of working. That's the white part of those bubbles. But it also has an external way of working. There's a service level agreement or an API to interacting with my team, for the techies among us. So we have this external facing way of working that tells other people, here's how you interact, here's how you interact or work with or collaborate with my team. So my team has its way of working. Your team has its way of working. When we interact together to get the job done, we collaborate together to do something, we will learn from each other and we will change our ways of working. So we might interact with each other today for whatever reason, and a few months from now, we interact with each other again. Each of us will have evolved, and because we've learned, and we'll have evolved our way of working. We might have evolved the team a bit as well. So the interactions will be different. So the point is that all of these teams have their own unique way of working. All of these teams are evolving. They're learning. I hope they're learning. I hope they're evolving over time. So your organizational processes are constantly in motion. They're constantly evolving. They're constantly changing. This is reality. This is what we need to deal with. And this is actually, if we can get good at this, first of all, if we can accept that this is the reality, and if we can get good at this, then this is the way we will be better prepared for next time when a black swan event occurs or some shift in the marketplace occurs that we need to respond to. So as I said earlier, there's a wide range of roles within your organization. This is just a very short list. So we support a wide range of roles because there's different process areas. In DA, we support the entire enterprise, not just software development teams. And because we look beyond the team, we realize that the different types of teams have different types of roles, and that's perfectly fine. Let's embrace that. Let's observe it. Let's embrace it. Let's make it better. So the toolkit itself is organized into 4 architectural layers as well. This is a different level of layers now. The first layer, the bottom layer, is our foundation layer. This is where the mindset stuff is. This is where fundamental agile and lean strategies are. Even serial traditional ways of working as well, because we are respectful enough to recognize that the traditional community has in fact done some very good things and has some great ideas. So let's leverage them. It'd be foolish not to. So we don't, in DA, we don't get into all these purist arguments over, well, if that's not pure Agile, therefore we're not going to do it. It's no, we want to be pragmatic. Let's do what we need to do to get the job done. I don't care if I'm pure or not. That's ridiculous. And there's roles, there's responsibilities, team structures, and of course, how do you choose your own way of working, which is the next section in this deck. The next layer up is Disciplined DevOps. So this is where Disciplined Agile delivery, Agile software development lands, and all aspects of enterprise class DevOps. So where some people like to talk about DevOps in terms of software development in combination with operations and how do we make that streamlined, which is a great start. Of course, there's also security, like DevSecOps. How does that fit in? There's also data. How does database DevOps fit in? Biz DevOps. How do you do release management or release coordination when you have hundreds or thousands of teams in flight? You don't want, we've had some organizations adopt DA with like 1,200 development teams. I don't want nobody wants 1,200 development teams just randomly slamming stuff into production. That is not a good idea, right? We want, there's got to be a little bit of coordination. And yes, we want to automate as much as possible. And yes, we want to streamline as much as possible. But it can't just be random, go off and figure it out on your own. That's insane. So at scale, we support a more robust, more sophisticated approach to DevOps because we want to do enterprise class DevOps. So we look at the whole picture. Building upon that are value streams. So how do we delight our customers? What products and services do we offer to our customers? How does the overall process fit together? And we'll see a workflow for that in a second. And then finally, Agile for the rest of the organization. So not only does our organization will offer multiple value streams, but there's some cross-functional efforts going on, such as finance, such as HR, people management stuff, such as IT, right? So such as enterprise architecture, vendor management, many others. So how does the rest of the organization be Agile? Because as we all know, we can try, my team can be as Agile as it can possibly be. But if I have to work with the vendor management folks and they are still working with traditional strategies, or if my finance team is still, has a traditional, annual budgeting mindset, that is going to greatly degrade my ability to be Agile. It's like asking me to go swimming and, oh, here's the finance anchor, put it around your neck as you're going swimming, and then we all wonder why we drown. So the entire organization has to move towards Agile, but these these various areas, like the Agile approach to finance is very different than the Agile approach to vendor management. So we need to help these various groups in an organization to become agile as they can be, as effective as they can be in the situation that they face. And we need to observe that this entire organization is a complex adaptive system. It's a team of teams working together, and we can only the fleet can only move as fast as the fastest, or as fast as the slowest boat. So we need to help everybody become more effective at what they do. And this is what the DA toolkit brings to the table. So our teams should adopt the appropriate life. So part of choosing your wow is to adopt the appropriate life cycle. So we support multiple life cycles. DA came about from my teams and my organizations, and originally from IBM, but my team and my work and my colleagues and business partners such as Mark Lyons, the co-creator behind the toolkit. Our various organizations were working around the world helping organizations to understand Agile and Lean and to apply it, and we were going in and doing assessments and strategy sessions and coaching and helping various organizations and teams around the world in all ranges, in all types of organizations to adopt Agile. And when we would go into these organizations, you could walk, you'd walk through the building, and there'd be the inevitable, let us show you our office, a tour of the building type of a thing, which was always nice. But and we could see Agile teams and Lean teams and big teams and small teams and teams that were spread out all over the place, teams that were all in the same room. It was phenomenally easy to observe different types of teams working different ways. So what that told us was that one size does not fit all. So when you've got a framework that's only based on one life cycle, I don't care how good that life cycle is, it's not going to get the job done for all of your team. It will for some teams, but not for all. So anyways, to make a long story short, we have multiple life cycles. We have multiple ways of working. So we support an Agile Scrum-based project life cycle. We also support more of a DevOps-y Agile life cycle as well, where maybe our team is releasing at the end of every week into production, for example. Not quite perfect DevOps, but certainly pretty darn good, pretty close to continuous delivery, but still working more of a Scrum-based approach, which is fine. We've seen some, we support a lean project-based lifecycle. We also support a continuous delivery lean lifecycle. This is where I hope most teams will evolve into at some point, because that to me is true, true DevOps, the dev portion of DevOps. That's the true dev side of that. But do the best you can in the situation that you face. We support an exploratory, hypothesis-driven, lean startup-based lifecycle as well as a program team of teams based lifecycle. So, and the interesting thing about that is we have never insisted that the sub-teams, that the squads follow the same process. We're seeing other frameworks finally coming around to that conclusion, but we never fell into that trap. So different teams can work in different ways, and rightfully so. And yeah, the coordination might become a little more complex when people are working in different ways, but you know what? We solve that problem as well. I'll show you this in a second. So here's the Agile project-based lifecycle. A couple interesting things you'll see here. First of all, as you can see in the middle, this is based on Scrum. We use slightly different terminology because we're agnostic. So as soon as you start using specific Scrum terminology, for example, suddenly you're no longer agnostic. So want to be careful about that. But if you like Scrum terminology, go ahead and use it. That's okay. What's interesting about this lifecycle, though, is it's showing the full project lifecycle. It shows the fact that that there's some sort of an inception startup type of a phase. Some people will call this sprint zero, although it's not really a sprint. Of course, there's a construction phase, and there's also a transition release type of a phase. Some people will call those a release sprint or a deployment sprint. Once again, it's not usually a sprint, and certainly a very different thing than a construction sprint. So we're not afraid to use accurate terminology. So we don't get into all this semantic goofiness that we see in some of the Agile frameworks because they don't want to talk. They don't want to actually observe what's really going on. We choose not to do that at all. You can also see that there's far more to it than just the project lifecycle. So long before this project kicked off, there must have been some sort of a portfolio management effort, some sort of project management effort. I hope there's an enterprise architecture effort. Eventually, we release into operations and support. Along the bottom, you see a collection of risk-based milestones. This is actually the key to supporting, to enabling different teams to work in different ways. So from if you step back and think about it from a leadership point of view, that's a horrifying proposition. What do you mean every team is going to work differently? How the heck can I keep an eye on them? How the heck can I lead them? How can we govern them? How can we make sure that they're compliant? And all these important questions that are real, valid questions that need to be answered, right? So how the heck do you do that? So we answer them. And one part of that solution is to have a common set of risk-based, lightweight milestones, not documentation-based, but risk-based across the teams. So allow the teams to work in whatever way they want, just as long as they address risks in a manner that's appropriate to the situation they face. If they can address these common risks, well, that enables us to guide. That enables us to govern effectively. And there's a little more to governance than that, but that is certainly a key thing. So we can have consistent governance across the teams, and yet allow the teams to work in a unique and changing manner. This is another one of the life cycles. In this case, the continuous delivery life cycle, continuous delivery lean life cycle, I should say. As you can see, the work items, the work that needs to be done, the requirements, the backlog, whatever you want to call that, is managed in a much different way on a lean team. This is a continuous delivery team, so we see the inception phase and the transition phase have disappeared. Inception must have occurred at some point in the distant past, but because we keep the team together, we're no longer doing projects, but we're taking more of a product mindset now and have this long-standing team, what we see is that the team, yes, they did Inception a long time ago, but they no longer need to do it because the team just continues to work. Transition has disappeared through automation. So we've automated our tests, we've automated our deployment scripts, we've automated the living heck of everything. So we're taking much more of a DevOps type approach to the way that we work as opposed to a project-based approach. So anyways, the point is that different teams will work in different ways. And there's other life cycles than just these two, but I wanted to point this out. And also notice, as you can see, there is, the similar milestones. So some of the milestones don't apply anymore. Well, a subset of the milestones apply when you take a continuous delivery approach as opposed to a project-based approach. But the key ones, the key risks are being dealt with in a similar way by these teams. And this slide basically gets into the idea of lean governance. So we can have consistent governance across these teams and yet enable them to work in different ways. This is the DA Flex lifecycle. So as I said, we were lucky enough to merge with Al Shalloway's organization. So PMI has brought DA and Flex together, and we spent the last almost half year, I guess, integrating Flex into DA. So this forms this is one aspect of Flex. This is the DA Flex lifecycle for value streams. As you can see, it begins and ends with customers, and it's continuous. The nice thing about this, well, there's many nice things about this, but you can see how everything fits together. We want to optimize our way of working across the entire value stream, not just within our individual teams. We can see in the middle there that there's several efforts that support these value streams. What's also interesting, we can see how we're bringing measures and strategies into account, how we explore customer needs, and eventually coming out at the end, I guess, of the life cycle, we see value being delivered to customers, and it's actual realized value. So even though our delivery teams, our DevOps teams, might be releasing value into production, or might be releasing what they believe to be valuable into production, it's not until it's actually being used and value is being realized by the customers that we've actually achieved something of value for them, right? So just because, here's this really cool thing that I want to sell you, doesn't mean they're going to buy it. So we need to have this more robust view of the way it works. So anyway, so now we brought it all into account there. And what's interesting is behind the scenes, behind each of these hexes, each of these, let's assume for a moment it's different teams doing all these things and we're collaborating together effectively. Each of these different teams or different areas can be working in their own unique way and be evolving and changing as they learn, as they improve. And in DA, we give you options to do this, and I'm going to walk you through this in a minute. So so we have to assume, if you remember back to the slide where it's talking about how organizations are complex adaptive systems, well, an implication of that is if these are different teams doing some of these different process blades, these different process areas, those teams will be changing, they'll be learning, they'll be evolving their way of working over time, which is exactly what we want them to do. We want to enable them to get better. We want to be constantly improving our overall process. And that means the people involved will be improving and changing the ways that they work. So we desperately want this. But we also have to assume that this is going to happen and we have to act accordingly. So we all need to be flexible in the way that we collaborate with others. So how do we do this? How do we choose our wow? How do we choose our way of working? So an interesting question to ask is, are you in framework jail? So this is a concept that Ivar Jakobsen introduced 3 or 4 years ago now in his work around Essence. And he basically observed that many teams, they've adopted, the traditional waterfall way of working, or Scrum, or SAFe, or Less, or something else, or they've created their own way of working. And they all tend to be in method jail or framework jail, where they've sort of hit the limits of what these frameworks will do. So how does this occur? So let's say today we decide to adopt a new framework, whatever that framework happens to be. And let's assume, of course, that it all works out well for us. So we're going to give everybody the benefit of the doubt here. So there's always an initial learning. There's always an initial learning curve. We have to get some training, a little bit of coaching. It takes a while to figure out what we're doing. So your effectiveness goes down a bit. But then after a few days or a few weeks, usually we start to get better. And because we learn, right? We figure out the basics, and we tweak what we're doing, and we adopt whatever this framework is, and things get better. But then we hit the limits because all these frameworks solve a certain problem. So if you've got that problem, and if you adopt the framework and you're successful at it, at some point you hit the limit. Like you get the benefit out of the framework, which is great, and that's exactly what you want. So the question is, and that's if you're successful. So we're going to assume you're successful at this. The question is how high, how much more effective are your teams on average? And the thing we need to watch, there's a lot of rhetoric. There's a lot of marketing rhetoric, and we need to be smart about this. So if if the purveyor of method X or framework X tells you, oh, we'll get we'll get twice the work for half the time, or we'll get 10 times productivity increase, you got to assume that maybe that's a bit of marketing and they're telling a tall tale, or maybe they're sharing an anecdote with you, right? Because I'm sure there's some I've seen. It's no doubt. I have no doubt about this. I have seen some teams, yes, in fact, get 10 times productivity increase by adopting a framework. But you know what? They were hopeless. It's not because of the framework. It's because they were so messed up to begin with. Helping them do anything is going to, anything different than what they were currently doing, it's going to help. Okay, so it really wasn't adopting that framework. It was you guys were hopeless. Do something different, and pretty much anything different is going to help them. So, but those are outliers. We need to look at the averages. So who do we go to? So to make a long story short, there's a gentleman named Dr. Don Reifer, and he did his PhD a few years ago now in Agile. And his work was focused on answering the question, how effective is Agile in practice? And so he got, he did if you know anybody with a PhD, it's hard to earn a PhD. So he did this research, worked for years on this, did this research, published, got his PhD, but then he continued on, and he's made a business out of continuing his research into how effective things are. And he publishes new reports on a regular basis, and he makes money doing this, and he consults, and good for him. But the thing is he is not married to any of these frameworks. He's not a SAFe guy. He's not a LESS guy, not a Scrum guy, not a Disciplined Agile guy. He's just researching these various frameworks. And he's researching what the heck is actually going on out there. And what he's found is that these Agile methods, like the smaller team-based methods like Scrum, on average are getting, on average, so some teams will be doing better, some teams will be doing worse, but on average they're seeing about a 7-12% productivity improvement, which is good. That's a good investment, right? You've done well by getting that. On the scaling frameworks, 3 to 5%, so barely measurable in many ways, right? Once again, these are averages. Some organizations are doing much better, but some organizations are doing much worse, but on average, 3 to 5%. And remember, this is a gentleman that doesn't have any skin in the game. He's not aligned with any of these frameworks and any of these methods. So I'm a little more willing to listen to what he's got. So anyways, yes, the frameworks are adding value, but maybe not as much as what we're being told. So what do the organizations do that are really good? So what do the Facebooks of the world and what do the Googles of the world, what do they do? Why is Amazon so scary? That's the question that we should be asking. So what we need to do is to recognize that yes, the frameworks are helping, but there's limits. We end up in framework jail. So what are the Amazons doing? Well, they're doing something called continuous improvement. This is from Total Quality Management from, I believe, from the 80s, certainly from the early 90s, but more likely from the early 80s or from the mid 80s. And what they've been doing is they follow a technique called Kaizen. They follow this practice where they make a small change and they run an experiment. They run into an issue. So they identify a problem. They identify potential, one or more potential ways of addressing that problem. Then they try them out. This is called validated learning. So they figure out, okay, we believe that technique X, that adopting TDD, for example, will solve this problem. So let's try it out, give it a fair shake. Then we will assess the effectiveness. So we'll measure somehow. So before they adopt, they first decide that here's how we know we're successful. Here's how we're going to measure it. So they try the technique out. They then measure. They assess how effective it was. If it was a good idea, they adopt it. If it was a bad idea, oh well, hey, we've learned. We failed fast. Good for us. So we'll abandon it. Doesn't work. And of course, if we're nice, then we share our learnings with the other teams in our organization, and maybe even with other people around the world. So because why wouldn't we, right? So let's be nice about it. So this is what the Amazons of the world are doing, and this works well. And what happens is when you take this approach, this learning organization-based approach, you end up with improving over time. And this is why the Amazons of the world are so scary. They've been doing this for 15 or 20 years, and they make all these improvements one little small step at a time, and it's added up to something really impressive. So how do we improve upon this? This is this is the value proposition now for Disciplined Agile. So we can recognize, I hope you can recognize, some experiments are going to fail. And that's okay. You run an experiment. Sometimes it succeeds. Sometimes it fails. Some of the consultants will say, well, there's never really a failed experiment because we've learned something. Take it from me, the people paying the bills don't like hearing that, right? Because I just paid for you to learn something. I would rather pay to get successes. So yes, failing fast is significantly better than failing slowly. That's good. But wouldn't we rather succeed? Can we succeed more often? Can we succeed earlier? So this is the question that we're answering in DA. So if we can get better at identifying the potential techniques to experiment with, the implication is we will fail less often. Now there's still be some failures. You're only human. Sometimes you're going to guess wrong, and that's okay. Stuff happens. But if more of our guesses are accurate, if we succeed more often, then we improve faster. Can we learn to do this? And if we can learn to do this, if we can learn to follow this sort of a technique and do it in a smart manner, this is how we can be prepared for next time, because we've learned how to improve. We've learned how to learn. So that way, when a new problem rises up, and it will, we know this for a fact, we are better at identifying it. We get better at sensing it, and we get better at responding to it. This is what DA teaches you how to do. So how do we do this? Well, we can only get better at identifying these potential techniques if we have access to an experienced Agile coach, which I hope you do. Coaching is important. And hopefully it's a coach with experience in whatever problem you're currently facing. But if you don't have access to such people, or if you haven't, for whatever reason, you don't have the budget, or you just can't find them, because really, there's a lot of Agile coaches out there, but there's a small number of very good, experienced Agile coaches out there. Big difference. So you got to get good at identifying who the really good coaches are. Another way, a better way, is to actually teach. If you can provide some sort of a knowledge base, if you can teach people how to actually fish for themselves, then you're much better off. Or at least if you can hire coaches who have access to such a knowledge base and can actually navigate, do a little bit of work to learn how to navigate it, then you're much better off, right? So anyway, so how do we do this? So this is what the DA Toolkit's all about. So the idea here is that organizations such as Amazon and Facebook and many others currently enjoy, the dash line of continuous improvement. They're constantly improving, constantly getting better, and they're so far ahead of us that, they really are on the leading edge. But that's not you. So you can actually leverage the learnings of others through the DA Toolkit. So we can actually show you how to get on a faster learning curve, or a faster improvement curve, I should say, by teaching you how to succeed more often, by making better choices in the techniques that you're going to experiment with. So this is what DA is all about. So our philosophy, as I said earlier, is you start where you are. So what are, that orange line that, whatever you're currently doing, if it's traditional, if it's safe, if it's Scrum, that's great. That's where you are. It's where you are. Good for you. So you can either start doing continuous improvement like the Amazons of the world and start getting better, start working your way out of method jail, or with DA, you can do it faster. We can, we'll teach you how to actually do this stuff. So you should, because you should always, do the best that you can, but always try to get better, always try to learn. And particularly in the current, COVID and upcoming post-COVID environment, this is absolutely critical. So let's work through a scenario. How do you actually do this? So I'm on a team, and we've got an existing product. We've been working together for a while. Boom, COVID hits, or boom, the next black swan. Let's assume it's the next black swan or the next big problem that we face. So something has changed in the marketplace, and we really do need to attract new customers, because yes, we're sort of, we're chugging along doing what we're doing, but some of our customers have disappeared because they're no longer in business, and we really do need to start attracting some new customers. So we've been releasing new features to our product, but we're not growing our customer base. We're not attracting new customers. What do we do? Well, we hold so we've identified this in a retrospective, and we think, what, maybe we need to follow the exploratory lifecycle, because we should really let's go off and create some MVPs and do some experiments in the marketplace and A/B testing, all the stuff that that we want to get on our resumes. Okay, that's an option, but it's probably overkill in this situation, right? And we don't have, and one of the challenges, we don't have a really big idea. We don't, our ideas are not attractive to the marketplace right now. So, we really don't have we don't have a big idea to act on, and our little idea is not getting the job done. So the real problem here is we don't understand what the potential new customers want. How are they going to use our new system? What features do they need in order to get valuable usage out of our system? So we really need to explore usage requirements more effectively. What do we do? So we go to the toolkit, and we realize, oh, well, we've really got a problem with the way that we explore scope. So let's dive down to the details. So this is a collection of what we call 21 process goals. This is what this is looking at from the point of view of a solution delivery team, or particularly a software development team. In many cases, there's different configurations of this for different types of teams, but the idea here is that, oh, we've got a problem with the way that we explore scope. Okay, fine. So what we do? So let's go to the goal diagram. I mentioned this earlier. So how do we identify potential techniques? So the way you read this diagram, so it's all about, here's different ways we can explore scope. The square rectangles work through here's what we call decision points, or the intentions that we have. Here's what we need to work through, to think about, to explore scope effectively. And we see that, oh, wait a minute, when it comes to exploring usage, which is where we believe our problem to be, there's different ways, there's different techniques that we can apply. It's not just about epics and user stories, the things we learned in our certification class. Oh, who knew, right? Who knew that there's far more ways that we can explore usage other than epics and user stories? And look at that. There's and we're not saying that these are all the possible techniques, but we are saying this is a pretty darn good list, a heck of a starting point to let you know, hey, you got some choices. But then we look at this list and go, oh man, I haven't heard of most of these things. I don't have the experience. We don't have deep experience on our team to know about these techniques. We've never even heard of some of them. So we look them up in the toolkit, and the way the toolkit is organized. So this is a tables now, detailed table. So what we're seeing here is a brief description of each of these techniques. In some cases, there's references to go click on this and read more about epics or outcomes or UML if you happen to be interested in that. But so go look at these various, go look at the details if you need them. But we give you enough of a description to get a feel for what these things are, and then, oh, wait a minute. So personas in this case, that looks like something that might get the job done. If we could only identify the potential types of new customers, then maybe we'd have a better understanding of what they want. So you can also see in the right-hand column, we have a list of trade-offs, because there's no such thing as a best practice. This is the fundamental problem, I think, in the process world right now. We keep, and with a lot of these frameworks, is they present their techniques as if they're best practices. Well, that's nonsense. Any given practice, I've been looking for a best practice now for over 30 years. Haven't found one. I know I can tell you about thousands of practices. Haven't found one that's best. Because what I have found is that every single strategy, every single practice has advantages and disadvantages. It makes sense in some situations and is a spectacularly bad idea in others. So what we need to do is understand when should we use each technique to what extent, and then use it appropriately. So for example, if I had, I've got an older house and I have to fix things all the time. So I have a toolkit with, several dozen tools in it. So if some kid throws a baseball through one of my windows this afternoon, okay, fine, it happens. But to replace the window, well, first thing I've got to do, I probably have to get a hammer to knock the glass out. Then I'm going to have to use other tools to, get new glass and cut the glass and put it in, and, probably have to take out some of the wood and all sorts of stuff. So if you ever replaced a window, you know what I'm talking about. But the point is that at one point I had to use a hammer to get rid of the old glass, but after that, the hammer is probably no longer useful to me. Like certainly I'm not going to, cut a big piece of glass down to a smaller size using a hammer to knock off chips until finally I've got a rectangle that fits into my window frame. It doesn't work that way, right? We need a glass cutter for that. So different tools have advantages and disadvantages. And if I only have a hammer, there's no possible way I could actually effectively fix a window. I need several tools, and that glass cutter, I might only use that once every 10 years. Because how often do I need to cut glass? But when I have to cut glass, I need a tool that does that. So same sort of thing when it comes to your process. You've got to have a collection of techniques at your disposal, know how to use them, and apply them in the right situation that you face. The DA toolkit helps you do that. And being able to identify these techniques easily, identifying the right technique, this is how you prepare yourself to address the changing environment that you are in. So we can improve faster with guided continuous improvement. Actually, this is a repeat of those slides. My bad. So, parting thoughts before I go to questions. So yeah, if you haven't done so already, if you got questions, please start typing them into the Q&A window. So DA is a toolkit that enables us to make better decisions inside our organizations and inside of our teams as well. So it's all about optimizing your way of working, about evolving and meeting the situation that you face. We want to extend, and we want to, of course, extend agility across the entire organization to be truly agile. So once again, it's great that your team is agile, but if the rest of the organization is struggling and goes out of business, probably not good for you, right? So we need to help the entire organization to become more effective, to improve and be able to respond and become more competitive in the organization, to deliver value more to your customers more effectively, to delight your customers more effectively. So we need to be truly effective across the entire organization, not just effective in your team. So successful organizations like the Amazons, the eBays of the world, they take responsibility for evolving their way of working, for evolving their own agility. So the frameworks are, the Agile framework, don't get me wrong, they're a great start. It might be a great starting point for you, but at some point you need to move beyond. You need to work your way to MethodGel. So if you want to be responsive in this new challenging marketplace that we find ourselves in, you really do need to understand and to teach your teams how to choose their wow and to allow them and enable them to do this. And this is what DA is all about. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day.
All right, Scott, we appreciate you taking the time to address our community. For more information about the Disciplined Agile Toolkit, you can visit pmi.org. And for further updates and other webinars for users from the Zoho community, you can keep following us at Zoho Sprints on Twitter and LinkedIn. And you can also connect with Scott on Twitter and LinkedIn. He's very active on social media, posting a lot of dad jokes these days.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure.